Yeah. All right. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Hakeem Crampton. I'm the Government Relations Liaison for Citizens for Prison Reform, and it is exciting to be welcomed today. We are welcoming Susan Prentice South from the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission. She is the Director of Training there. And welcome, Susan. It's so wonderful to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me to participate today. I'm really excited.
Wonderful, wonderful. This is a great opportunity for the Participatory Defense First Hub of Citizens for Prison Reform, as we are hosting a series of webinars helping support families in understanding the legal court processes so that they will be better equipped to support their family member or even themselves should they be experiencing court involvement at any level. So once again, welcome to this webinar where today we will be discussing the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission. We'll be discussing its history, its background, its aim, its scope, and just the whole gist of the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission and how, in fact, they are able to help support our systems here in the state of Michigan and being better equipped to provide legal and adequate, sufficient representation to those that are in need of attorney representation, experiencing court involvement. So I myself used to be a commissioner appointed by Governor Gretchen Whitmer in 2019. So I have some intimate experience, having served on the commission for a 4-year term that expired in 2023. So it's the perfect opportunity to discuss the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission, particularly because I have some background experience, sat on a couple of committees. And so I was just in the public defender office yesterday for their grand opening of the Ingham County Public Defender Office in Lansing. I got the chance to see their office there. It's wonderful. I was on the construction committee of the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission. So when they submitted their original proposal to start looking for a new place to move to and funding that they would need for that, I was on that committee. So it was wonderful to see it all come to fruition. So Susan, let's just jump right in and let's talk about the history of the MIDC and Governor Snyder's interest in supporting Michigan with being able to have adequate legal representation for public defense. Let's talk about that.
Thank you. One of the things that makes the MIDC really special is that it has always received bipartisan support. So in 2011, Governor Snyder issued an executive order establishing the initial Indigent Defense Advisory Commission. This commission was responsible for recommending improvements to the state's legal system. Everyone understood that we were not providing constitutionally adequate representation here in Michigan. These recommendations served as a basis for the legislation to address this need and created a permanent Indigent Defense Commission, which we call the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission today. And the governor signed that into law in July 2013. We began funding systems in 2019. So public defender offices started to crop up all over the state, along with managed assigned counsel administrators.
Nice, nice. So when you talk about a system, a public defense system, what does that mean and what does that look like in comparison, for example, to what we had before?
So before, every county in Michigan funded its own indigent defense system. So there would be typically a roster of attorneys that were called court appointed attorneys, and they would receive typically a flat amount of money. Like in Kalamazoo, we receive $460 for a low level felony total. Unless you went to trial, you got more money. And the rates were low. It was hard to access investigators and experts. There were no social workers participating in the process for the defense teams. What happened is that there are courts called third class district courts, and they're run by cities. So the cities also had to spend their own money on attorneys to represent people typically on a misdemeanor, and they weren't. They were spending maybe $4,000 a year. Almost no one was getting an attorney. And so everyone who spent money, whether it was a city or a county, is called a system. And we have over 120 systems in Michigan. And so the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission contracts with each system to provide now state funding for indigent defense.
Okay, wonderful. That's great history. Now let's dig in and do a little bit more kind of constructing of what MIDC really is, right? So MIDC has 18 commissioners overseeing the commission work, right? But then there's also a staff who actually is on the ground day to day, where the commission is
Yeah.
meeting monthly by monthly, et cetera. So what does that look like? Describe what the MIDC is as a commission and as a staff.
As a commission, there are 18 commissioners, and they come from all walks of life. So we have people, we have a prosecutor, we have community citizens, we have defense attorneys, county administrators, judges, just a whole conglomerate of people with different views, but all believe in indigent defense. What was your second question?
Well, and let's describe what is their role on the commission.
Their role is to make policy decisions the for the staff. So they hire the executive director and supervise the executive director. They attend approximately 6 meetings a year where we talk about the budgets, the grant applications, and cost analysis for each system, talk about if systems are in compliance or not, ways we can address attorney shortages throughout the state.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And so these commissioners, they're appointed by the governor to serve 4-year terms, correct? And so the
Correct.
staff, what does the staff makeup? What are some of the type of positions on the staff, and what are some of their roles?
So we have a deputy director, Marla McCowan, who helps to really be the the conductor of the symphony. Um,
Mhm.
and she's really remarkable in being able to juggle all the balls. And there is a legislative director, Marcella. So she works on creating legislation and appropriations, budgets, all that sort of stuff. Helps with the grants that we have because we also have federal grants. We have a grants director, Rebecca, who works on making sure her team of analysts and her make sure that the systems are spending money appropriately.
Mhm.
And we have a research director, Jonas Siegel, and he works on developing new policies, procedures, anything that can be done to help indigent defense or individual systems. And I think what clients and families will be most familiar with is what's called a regional manager. There's a team of 6 regional managers who are assigned to each portion of the state, and they visit the system. So they're in the public defender's office and the courts on a weekly basis. They're watching court, they're monitoring complaints. Not that we address the complaints, but we are trying to figure out if there's a compliance issue that we need to help with, um, if referring people to the proper resources that they need, and all of that. And they are supervised by our senior regional manager, Melissa Wangler.
Mhm. Nice, nice. A great staff, it sounds like. I got a chance to work with them. And so let's dig into this area. So the commission itself, the commissioners, they are drafting the policy of the minimum state standards that public defense must meet. When we're talking about
Mhm.
public defense, oftentimes we're probably talking about public defenders working within the public defense system. So what does that look like when we're talking about minimum state standards that a public defender, if I'm a loved one and if I'm a loved one of someone who's going to court and they have a public defender, how do those minimum state standards apply, and what should I know about these minimum state standards with regard to representation of my loved one?
I love this question. I really love it because it's noticeable. This is stuff that families really can notice. If you or a loved one went through the system 15 years ago, it looks incredibly different to go through the system now. One of the standards is education and training. We refer to it as standard one. But education and training means that everybody, every lawyer in the state of Michigan that handles indigent defense, which might just be one case, has to receive 12 hours of continuing legal education, and the state pays for that legal education. And so you are now working with attorneys who receive a minimum of 12. Many attorneys do 50, 60 hours a year of continuing legal education. We have attorneys that are better trained, better understand what zealous representation should look like and what they need to look like. We do ethics training so they better understand attorney-client privilege in confidential communications.
That's wonderful. So, what about counsel at first appearance? Like, how important and valuable would that be for someone experiencing court involvement?
Oh, that's huge. So before, in the olden days, you would go to court in arraignment and it would be you and a judge, sometimes a prosecutor, but there would be no defense attorney there. And now everybody has a right to representation by a free defense attorney at arraignment. And so the goal is that fewer people are receiving bonds, cash bonds, or being detained, in that most people are receiving PR bonds where it's free. They just have to follow a list of conditions and they are free to go home.
Yeah, yeah, that's wonderful. So there's another important standard that must be met, and that's independence from the judiciary. How important and valuable is that to that my attorney, for example, if I have a public defender, that my attorney is truly independent from the judge, from the prosecutor, from the system per se. He's just a public servant that's there to serve the interests of the public, and now I'm his client. How important is that?
It's critical. In the olden days, when I was doing this work, representing people, the judges were in charge of who was on the list, which attorneys received work, how much work they received, and the amount of money they received for compensation. And so some attorneys felt a real tension between, do I represent my client really zealously and ruin the judge's docket? Or do I cater to the judge so I get more work so I can pay my bills?
Right, right, right.
And so now that tension is completely gone. No judge in the state has any control over whether or not an attorney receives indigent defense work, how much they get paid to do that work, if their entire bill gets approved or not. They are out of the equation. Just like they don't control the prosecutor's office, they don't control the defense attorneys either.
Mm, wonderful, wonderful. So we've covered about three of the standards so far. Let's talk about another one of the standards, like attorney compensation. We know that before, attorneys were compensated a flat rate, $250, for example, in Jackson County, right, for some cases. And the detriment to that, now attorneys are compensated an adequate, pay, which really incentivizes them to do good work, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's several studies that have been done that prove that hourly pay is critical to zealous representation. And so instead of these flat rates where the quicker you resolved a case, the more you made because the less work you put into it, now it's all hourly rate. And they're paid well. They may be free to the client, but they are not free attorneys. For example, they make anywhere from $125 to $200 an hour throughout the state of Michigan, depending on the type of case, the location in Michigan that they are traveling to, uh, and that competition, attorney shortages, stuff like that.
Wonderful. That's great. That's great. So, what about we talked about training. What about qualification? What does that mean for attorney to be qualified?
It means that they have to have the proper training and experience in order to handle a certain type of case. So for a misdemeanor, the attorney needs to have, if the, they need to have they need to satisfy all of the basic requirements in order to be able to represent someone in a misdemeanor. It's no longer a training ground for brand new attorneys that are unsure of what they're being asked to do. And so, in order to satisfy the basic requirements, they need to have so much training, so many hours of training. They need to have basic skills training of how to introduce evidence, how to make an opening argument, how to run a trial, how to object to improper evidence. They have to have actual experience in the courtroom or be monitored or mentored by someone who does. So the old days of baby lawyers being thrown into the abyss are over, and the horrible consequences that had on clients is over as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for that. So let's talk about investigators, and expertise, because we know that in the past here in Michigan, it was difficult to adequately defend yourself if you had a public defender who couldn't, bring in experts and, you know, provide expert testimony and do expert research and testing and things of that nature. Whereas the prosecution they could always do those things and go steps further to present their case to the jury. What does that
Yeah,
mean for us now?
it means we're leveling the playing field.
Mm,
It means that prosecutors are being asked to do their job and to prove their case. They have the burden of proof, not the defense. But the defense is now able to make it much more difficult for the prosecutors to come in with bad science, junk science, or investigations that were done lousy, because now we can have an investigator that reviews the work of the prosecutors, cops and investigators, and say, no, they skipped 12 steps. That's inappropriate.
mm. Yeah, that's powerful. That's critical. That's critical. And I think lastly is the workloads that public defenders can take on, because if a public defender has 100 cases, it's going to be difficult to manage those cases, and those cases won't be adequately represented. Is that correct?
That's correct. There is a cap of 400 misdemeanors a year
Hmm.
and 150 felonies a year, or some combination of those. And and lawyers can opt to take a lot less
Hmm.
because they are being paid hourly. So they don't have to take enormous caseloads in order to make a decent living and do the things that they have to do, like pay back their student loans and run their offices.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we know this issue overall, that the Michigan Indigent Defense represents, is really about preserving a constitutional right, to adequately defend yourself in a court of law should you be accused of a crime. What does that mean for a family member to know that their rights are being protected by the existence of the MIDC?
I think it means everything. One of the things I love to point out to people is that judges and prosecutors and cops are not in the Constitution. The
Mm,
only lawyer in the Constitution is a defense lawyer. They're the
wow.
only lawyers that have the right to exist and the right and must exist. And so we're the last line of defense against big government,
Mm,
against tyranny. And so it's critical that your loved ones are receiving zealous representation, not just adequate or sufficient, but zealous representation, because that's how we keep government in check.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow, that's powerful. And I have in front of me my own MIDC 3-ring binder, right?
I
Full of
love that.
a lot of information, right, about the MIDC and the work of public defense and the background, the history, the reports, etc. Where can people in society out here in Michigan find out more about the MIDC, and what can they expect to find out? And what resources are available on the website, etc.
They can Google Michigan Indigent Defense Commission or MIDC, and our website will pop up. They can contact anybody on the staff. So if they need to speak with a regional manager, they can look at the map of Michigan, see which regional manager covers their location, and contact that regional manager. That's what regional managers do. They answer questions from the public all the time. There is a process to FOIA information from us, and our legislative director manages the FOIAs. There is opportunities if you have questions. You can always contact me. I'm happy to answer questions for people. And so you can find my picture and phone number and email address on the website. We also have more information about all of our standards and policies and history all on the website.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you about the mission of the MIDC, the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission, covering some of the standards, a little bit of background, the history of it, kind of putting in perspective of how valuable and how useful this would be to families. So, the Citizen for Prison Reform and Participatory Defense First Hub is grateful for your time spending with us on this webinar. We thank you so much, Susan. We thank all the staff and all the great work you're doing at the MIDC. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you for the important work that your organization is doing.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate you so much.